So Alien Romulus was directed by Fede Alvarez and it was produced by Ridley Scott, and it stars Kaylee Spaney as a scientist on another mission in space and such, and it takes place during the events of the first Alien movie as well as Aliens, and it's about another group of scientists who find themselves coming across the various xenomorph facehuggers and so on and so forth. So I am going to be honest with you. This was one of those movies that I was not looking forward to. Despite the fact that I love Alien and love Aliens so much, pretty much everything after Aliens has not been particularly great. Even though each Alien movie, I'm like, okay, there's at least some interesting idea, I felt like all of them kind of were just underwhelming in some way, especially compared to the other two. And this new movie, the trailers didn't interest me too much. Fede Alvarez is an alright director. I only liked one of his movies. And I just felt like, even though Ridley Scott endorsed this movie and such, I kept thinking, you did make Prometheus and Alien Covenant, so I don't have faith in this movie quite a bit. So, but I still wanted to see it. I still wanted to see what this movie had to show us and such. And this movie may be the best Alien movie since Aliens. Yeah, those critics were saying, yeah, this is the best Alien movie since Aliens. Yeah, they were right because this movie does a lot of things I'm going to dive into. First off, I do think the actors do a pretty good job, particularly Kaylee Spaney. I definitely liked her as the movie kind of like went on and such, and I definitely bought her character, and I kind of want to see more of what her character can do. David Johnson as well. I was very intrigued by his performance. I was definitely surprised, like with the reveal and such, but then I was like, oh right, it's an alien movie and such. So I definitely thought his character was pretty interesting. I didn't like his character at first, but like as the movie kind of went along, and definitely some of the interactions that we see with his character and some of the other characters later on in the movie, I definitely became more invested in his character and like some of the actions that he does in the movie. Meanwhile, we do get a lot of xenomorph action almost immediately, I would say. There's a lot of action, and I would say about 30 minutes in. Like, at least with some of these other alien movies, the action doesn't really take place until like, an hour into the movie. This movie is action packed. This movie has a lot of great sequences. I won't spoil them all here, but let's be honest. This is one of those movies that you kind of need to see just to see some of the surprises of this movie. It's like, oh wow, I did not expect it to be like that. That is incredible right there. And I do think the action sequences just get better and better. The sequence in the finale, wow, that is incredible right there. And I will say this movie is also pretty scary as well. This movie got really scary at times. Like, this movie is pretty effective in that department. Like, Alien is obviously Alien and Aliens are pretty scary themselves, but this is probably the scariest that an Alien movie has been since those. And I do think that the production values themselves are pretty cool. The ship you see, and also like the area and such, like in the beginning of the movie, is pretty fascinating as well, pretty well realized and such. And I do think that this movie does a really good job with their practical effects. There's so many times in this movie where it's like, that is pretty creepy, that is pretty well done, but like it also looks pretty realistic. I'm like, that, like, I know Fede Alvarez likes to use practical effects, like he used to use practical effects on Evil Dead and such. So it's like, yeah, a lot of this stuff does feel pretty realistic, and I think that actually heightens it a lot more than something like, say, something with CGI and such. That is pretty creepy in itself. And I do think that this movie does a good job of callbacks to all Alien movies, and not just obviously Alien and Aliens and such, but even to some of the lesser Alien movies. Like, there's a callback to Prometheus at one point. It's like, this movie definitely feels more like an Alien prequel than Prometheus does, and I was like, that is surprising. Like, Prometheus had its moments, but kind of an underwhelming movie overall. But it definitely kind of ties back into that movie. It's like, okay, that's kind of interesting. And I do think that this movie has a lot. Admittedly, I think this movie does have some dumb actions that are done by the characters and such, but I feel like they're not normal dumb. Like, some of the actions in Prometheus I thought were dumb, Alien Covenant dumb. This movie, it's like, you kind of think it's like, why would you do that? But then you're like, yeah, you kind of think, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like, that's why you didn't do it. It's like, okay, at least I can understand why some of these characters are on this mission now, because like obviously they're doing something. It's like, oh, that's actually smarter than I realized. Good for you, movie. And I do think that this movie does something that a lot of the Alien movies haven't done recently, and that is focus on action. Like, Prometheus had a few intriguing ideas, but didn't really focus on the action too much. Kind of focused on like trying to scare you and such. But this movie, I felt like the action was on point with a lot of the horror as well. Like, I feel like they were equal in this movie, and I definitely felt like this was definitely more of an action movie as opposed to just a horror movie. And I think that was just kind of missing because, like, yeah, Alien is more of a horror movie, but Aliens is more of an action movie. So I think this movie is a nice blend of both in some way. While not as great as Alien or Aliens, it's still a fun roller coaster ride that I wouldn't expect from a movie like this. But let's talk about some issues I have with the movie. The movie does have a few pacing issues here and there. Admittedly, even though I love Alien and Alien so much, I do think there are a couple pacing issues that are just mostly nitpicks. So I guess keeping in line with the other Alien movies, this movie does have some pacing issues as well. And I do think that some characters, while not unimportant or anything, but there are some characters who don't have a whole lot of character, and I felt that was kind of underwhelming. Like Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson, I thought they were the most well developed in this movie. I just felt like some of the other characters could have at least had something. Like, Bill Paxton didn't really have that big of a part in Aliens, but, at least his character was at least memorable. Most of these characters I'm not going to remember too much. I kind of remember some of their quirks and such, or kind of their traits and such, but not too much. There are some pretty gruesome deaths in this movie too. I forgot to add that. They are pretty graphic, and it's like, oh god, I didn't see that coming. So I do think those are very well done. And I do think there's like one moment in the movie which this may be a spoiler, but there's a reveal in this movie that definitely ties into the first Alien movie, which is not in the advertising at all. And I don't know how people are going to feel about this. Now, there are parts of me that are thinking, oh, this is kind of intriguing, like what they're doing with this character and how they're tying it into this movie, how it tied into the original movie and such, and how they're interacting with some of these characters and such. That is interesting. The other part of me is like, I don't know. I feel like this is a little insulting in some ways. It feels kind of weird and kind of goes against all the practical stuff that I've been talking about and such. Uh, I don't know how people are going to feel about that. And my last complaint about this movie has nothing to do with the movie itself, but has to deal with me and my timing and such. I wish I saw it on a bigger screen. I wish I saw this on the biggest screen possible. I wish I saw it in something like IMAX or RPX or something, because like this movie definitely earned that. Like there are some visuals in this movie where I'm like, oh, I just want to see that on an IMAX screen. That is just incredible right there. That is just magnificent right there. This movie definitely deserves to be seen on the biggest screen possible. So if you have the chance to see it on IMAX or something, take that chance, because this movie definitely earned it. So I do think Alien Romulus, again, is one of the better Alien movies. I would say it's probably the best Alien movie since Aliens. The acting is well done. The xenomorph action is throughout the entire movie. The scares are really well done, and so are the action. They go hand in hand perfectly. The production values are great. The kills are very well done. The practical effects are really well done. The callbacks to other movies are great as well. Well, maybe some callbacks aren't as good as others, but there are definitely callbacks to even some of the lesser Alien movies. I do think that even some moments where it's like, it may look dumb at first, but when you think about it, it's like, oh, I do think, yeah, this is kind of interesting now. And I do think that the movie goes back to its action roots, and instead of just being a horror movie, we're kind of going into this pseudo-intellectual route. I do think that's very well done as well. And even though there are some characters that I feel like you don't really get a whole lot of character, there are some pacing issues here and there, and that one moment, which kind of plays a lot into the movie, it's like, I don't know how people are going to feel about that. I would still recommend this movie. This is a fun thrill ride from beginning to end, and honestly, I think I like this movie a lot more than when I was watching it. Again, see this movie on a large screen, the largest screen you can. I'll give Alien Romulus 3.5 out of 4 stars. See it. So, I did not expect it to give it that high of a rating, but here we are. Definitely check this one out. So, what did you think of Alien Romulus? And also, what's your favorite and least favorite Alien movie? Comment down below, subscribe to the channel. This is Pat. Stay safe.